You know how people were talking about, oh, if you believe in electoralism, you need to have three bare minimum demands for any incoming Democrat? I think we're at the point where your bare minimum demand must be that any politician that you are going to vote for must be calling for a new constitution at this point. And I really don't think this is unreasonable because we're at the point where the Trump administration is trying to undermine birthright citizenship, and we are in the first year. Like, it is just plainly obvious that even if this country survives Trump, which is a massive if, it's not going to be unharmed, and the wounds are going to be foundational. And like a return to normal, restore what was lost kind of status quo candidacy or presidency is not going to work. Like, that's not going to be sufficient to deal with the amount of damage that this country will undergo if it survives Donald Trump. Trump is a product of the system that allowed him to come into fruition. If we want to avoid this situation ever happening again, we need to fundamentally reshape this country to make sure that something like this can never happen again. And that is the absolute bare minimum demand.
I can't believe this is actually happening, but the Supreme Court just agreed to hear President Trump's case on ending birthright citizenship. And this could redefine what it means to be an American citizen. Trump's order, if you remember, says that kids born in the United States to illegal immigrants or short term visitors shouldn't automatically get citizenship. Now, immediately lawsuits hit, claiming it violates the 14th Amendment, specifically the phrase subject to the jurisdiction thereof. I mean, that's the entire fight, really. Does it mean anyone physically here for 5 minutes or people who actually owe full political allegiance to the United States? Now, for context, the 14th Amendment was written in 1868 to guarantee citizenship to freed slaves, not to answer modern questions about illegal immigration or birth tourism. And the big court case that everyone seems to cite dealt with parents who were here legally and permanently living here, not people who were here unlawfully or temporarily. Pure research, this one's pretty wild, says that births to unauthorized immigrants used to hit around 755,000 people a year. I mean, that's roughly 7% of all US births. I mean, that's why it matters. This ruling could reshape immigration incentives, taxpayer costs, and border policy overnight. So the Supreme Court will now decide, is automatic citizenship for everyone born here truly required by the Constitution, or is America overdue for a reset? Whatever they choose, this is one of the most important cases of our lifetime. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section. Appreciate you.
So on day one of Donald Trump's presidency, he issued an executive order. If you are born in the United States and one of your parents is not at least a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, you're not a U.S. citizen. 22 states filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump saying this is illegal. A federal judge agreed and issued a nationwide injunction saying this executive order can't go into effect. And Trump appealed, not whether his ban on birthright citizenship is legal or not. He appealed that a federal judge can't make this nationwide injunction while they're litigating this case out. And the Supreme Court decided with Donald Trump. So they haven't ended birthright citizenship. They didn't make a decision on that. What they have said is, if you are a child born in the United States in one of these 22 states that brought a lawsuit, that injunction continues. You will be considered a U.S. citizen. You will get your benefits as a U.S. citizen, whether it's your birth certificate, your social security number, Medicaid, food stamps, whatever you're entitled to. But if you're a child born in the United States, in any of these other 28 states that did not bring a lawsuit, the Republican states, in 30 days.
I need you to take my hand because we are going to walk through the dark together. The Supreme Court decided to take up the birthright citizenship case. That means at least 4 Supreme Court justices believe there is something to discuss when there is nothing to discuss. Ideally, they would have declined to hear this case, and that would have ended it right there. But instead of taking the correct path, they took one more step in the wrong direction. So let's just take the rest of the steps together right now, so we can stop the panic spiral and get to where we're thinking about what comes next. Now, of course, just because they took up the case doesn't mean they're going to side with Trump. They still have to actually have arguments. And we know we've got 3 votes on our side, and I think John Roberts will choose the correct side as well, which means we only need one of Barrett, Kavanaugh, and Gorsuch to side with history and the future to put this behind us for good. Worth noting it's a goddamn crime that Alito and Thomas just get a pass. But even though the correct path is still visible, this is way too close for comfort for something that is plainly written into the Constitution. So let's talk worst case scenario. Worst case scenario here is that the Supreme Court decides that the 14th Amendment does not specifically guarantee citizenship to children who are born to two undocumented immigrants. What happens next? The first thing is plain. The government will stop issuing citizenship documentation to new babies who are born to parents who cannot prove that one of them is either a citizen or a legal permanent resident. If either biological parent is a citizen or a legal permanent resident, citizenship would still be granted per Donald Trump's executive order, but at that point, it's just an executive order that he could change at any time. Which means if the Supreme Court sided with Trump, they would have to define in the majority opinion what the 14th Amendment does guarantee, because leaving it in a state where Donald Trump's executive order decides who's a citizen is obviously not a sustainable path, and I think even this Supreme Court would understand that. The second thing we would have to call out is that this does not create a new law. The Supreme Court doesn't create laws, they clarify and define laws. So in this case, they would be narrowing the definition of birthright citizenship in the 14th Amendment. What the Supreme Court could not do is say that it is illegal or unconstitutional to give birthright citizenship to children of undocumented immigrants. In other words, federal law could still solve for this. So if this worst case scenario comes true, and if this Supreme Court allows Donald Trump to deny citizenship rights to hundreds of thousands of children born in 2025 and all children born in the future to undocumented immigrants, our assignment becomes all the more clear. This would feed the conviction the left so desperately craves. We have fucked around and tiptoed around our commitment to human rights for too goddamn long. We didn't really punish the South after the Civil War. We didn't punish the South after segregation. We never codified Roe v. Wade. We have never effectively punished hate groups. We were too soft and too easy on the people who orchestrated January 6th. Now this Trump administration and this Supreme Court is the culmination of an infection of hate that this country has ignored for too goddamn long. But the values of the left, these are American values. This is what our founders envisioned and what our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents fought for in World War II. Real Americans have always known that the American dream has nothing to do with race, gender, ethnicity, or religion. The American dream is about the individual commitment to work hard and build something better with your community, in spite of the artificial barriers that the right wants to leverage to divide us. And we let it get so bad so long that at this point there's only one option left. Because I don't know about you, but I'm pretty fucking sick of being embarrassed to call myself an American. So we have only one choice. Sweep the House. Sweep the Senate, sweep the White House, fight every race and win every race at every level all of the time, and fight unrelentingly at every level all of the time to codify every single goddamn right that we ever took for granted, either with federal law or even better with amendments, so we can finally remember what it feels like and tell the rest of the world what it means to be an American.
Trump just asked the Supreme Court to overturn birthright citizenship and make a final rule once and for all on whether every person born in the United States is a U.S. citizen. Here's how we got here. On January 20th, 2025, Trump signed an executive order to end birthright citizenship to any child born in the United States whose parents are undocumented or on temporary protected status. That triggered multiple lawsuits. Lower courts issued universal injunctions blocking the order, stating that it's settled U.S. law that any child born in the U.S. is a U.S. citizen. In June 2025, the Supreme Court ruled that lower courts cannot make universal injunctions in any particular case, meaning an injunction order can only take effect in the state in which the court resides. But critically, the Supreme Court never ruled on whether birthright citizenship is a fundamental right in the United States. On July 10th, a New Hampshire judge certified a class action lawsuit and blocked the executive order nationwide. And again, children born in the United States are now U.S. citizens. But Trump has asked the Supreme Court to make a final ruling on this and determine whether or not.
The Supreme Court announced on Friday, December the 5th, that they will hear Trump's bid to end birthright citizenship. Back when Trump first took office, remember he signed all those executive orders, with this being one to end birthright citizenship. Under the 14th Amendment that was ratified in 1868, anyone born on U.S. soil would be considered a U.S. citizen. And of course, this is once again an attack on immigrants. It's an attack on immigrants. So will this apply to him and his son, Barron and Melania? Because as we know, Melania is an immigrant. And she had Barron over here on U.S. soil. I'm very curious, will this apply to them? And you know what? When it comes to this Supreme Court, I am getting sick and tired of them. The 6 of them that support Trump, they need to go. Instead of protecting the U.S. Constitution, they're going against it just like him. They need to go.
I haven't heard anyone talking about this, but the Supreme Court on Friday decided they're going to hear the Trump administration's arguments to end birthright citizenship. And this is a huge deal because birthright citizenship has been the rule for 127 years. On Trump's first day in office, he signed an executive order ending birthright citizenship. And this was extremely controversial, and it was struck down by 4 federal courts and 2 appeals courts. But the Trump administration decided to take it all the way to the Supreme Court. And originally people thought there was no way that they were going to hear it because birthright citizenship was literally established in the 14th Amendment when it says that all people who are born or naturalized into the United States are automatically U.S. citizens. So if the Supreme Court rules in favor of the Trump administration, that means anyone born in the United States to immigrant parents who were born after February 19th, 2025 are not going to be automatically granted citizenship, which is just crazy if the Supreme Court rules against this amendment. The Supreme Court is going to be hearing the Trump administration's arguments in the spring, so this is something that everyone should be following really closely because it's going to very much affect the immigrant population in the United States.
Thank you, Supreme Court. I really do appreciate y'all really for doing y'all job, man. Hey, they just took up the case for ending birthright citizenship for all the freeloaders that come here and, skirt our laws and come here and say they're now citizens, even though they're subject to the jurisdiction of another nation. Again, that's right. So all the liberals are going crazy because the Supreme Court decided to take this up. See, as a black man, I'm very, very happy because it's been so many different cultures and races and people who come here who basically benefit off the backs of slaves who built this country. Pretty much you wouldn't have a 14th Amendment without black people who were enslaved individuals. You mean the same people who come here and disrespect black people and look at us differently and look down on us, especially our ancestors who fought and died. And I hear these same individuals who come here and use that as an excuse and say, oh, we're Latinos or we're Hispanics or we're immigrants. We built this nation. No way in the fuck did you do that. We built the foundation of this country. You just lived to reap the benefits of it. And when Donald Trump said, guess what? We're going to stop all that. You ain't about to come here, drop a baby and feel like you got to stay here. Again, living off the backs of black people who you always disrespect. We as black people are so forgiving. It makes no sense, although we reap no benefits from it. Again, the 14th Amendment was built for and created for enslaved individuals who were not considered citizens. 3/4 of a man. After the Civil War, after individuals were free, and since then, everybody who comes here who wants to circumvent our laws, no other country does this. If you're underneath the jurisdiction thereof, another country, you can't just drop a baby here in the U.S. and say now it's a citizen. The left don't like that. For the left, that's the way that they repopulate and replenish their power base, by bringing these people here and letting them drop babies, and letting them live off the welfare system. Well, Supreme Court said, hey, well, let's take a look at it. I'm going to tell you one thing. If it's one thing that Donald Trump, his greatest achievement, I will always say, was appointing 3 Supreme Court justices to the Supreme Court. And being that you got a lot of conservatives that get a little bit older, like Clarence Thomas and them individuals, he could possibly appoint at least 2 more. That's what cements your legacy. Again, bringing common sense back to the White House. Common sense back to this nation. Again, you can't drop your babies here and feel like you got to live off the system. And I'm 100% for it. Supreme Court seems like they're on a roll lately. They approved Texas maps, about to get rid of racially drawn districts in the Voting Rights Act, and now on the birthright citizenship. Fat boy Roly-Poly Martin's about to have a heart attack. Hell, if he ain't already had a stroke as big as he is. So again, if you wonder, did I get what I voted for? Shit is the gift that keeps on giving. Keep doing your shit, President Trump. And to the Supreme Court, you know what to do. Make it right.
Breaking news. The Supreme Court decides to hear Donald Trump's birthright citizenship order. Yes, you heard me right. They are going to review the case. They want to review the constitutionality of Donald Trump's birthright citizenship, if it is allowed or not. And most of the time, this case has been thrown out of courts but they want to review it. Birthright citizenship is protected under the Constitution. It is a American born on this soil. They are called Americans, but they have two undocumented parents. And the thing is, 4 justices want to review this to see if it stands up, or maybe they will agree with Mr. Donald Trump and just throw it out. And if your parents are undocumented, you are not an American. Unbelievable. And the question you have to ask yourself, does Donald Trump own the Supreme Court?